Sexting and the teenage girl, it's a lose-lose situation. A new study published in the Journal of Children and Media shows how sexting is keeping the sexual double standard alive and well. We're joined now by the co-author of the study, Julia Lippman, postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Julia, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Julia, the responses from the 51 teens you questioned seem to suggest that sexting is becoming a normal part of adolescent courtship.
I don't know that I would say it's becoming a normal part. It's important to emphasize that the majority of teens are not sexting. When you look at nationally representative surveys, we see that about 4% of teens are sending sex, and about 15% of them are receiving them. So I wouldn't say that it is normal. However, there is a subset of teens who are incorporating this into their courtship rituals, and they're doing so in various ways.
And so a majority of teens, though, according to your study, how do they feel about texting, whether or not they're engaging in it?
Well, I think that one thing we are seeing is that there seems to be a pretty big double standard in how they evaluate sexting in general, and that really falls along gender lines. So what we see is that when they talk about their peers who are sexting, when they talk about the girls who sext, they're saying, these girls are really slutty. They're evaluated in these very harsh, negative, sexist terms. But they're also saying harsh, negative things about girls who don't sext. So those girls will get called prudes, or they'll get called stuck up.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you about, though, quickly, because it says the boys seem to perceive the girls with these labels. But the girls are then giving reasons for sexting that include feeling pressured into doing it by the boys.
Right. So that's definitely a big problem. And so one thing that, we want to emphasize is that we're not seeing sexting as necessarily being inherently problematic, but when it's happening in response to this sort of peer pressure, or when images are being distributed without the consent of the girls who've initially sent them, that's when it becomes problematic. And so we did hear from some of our female respondents saying things like they felt if they didn't sext a boy, usually somebody that they liked, that person wouldn't like them anymore, right? So they were afraid of not being approved of or liked by their peers, and that was really what was driving their behavior.
Yeah, and there you see the disconnect. They're afraid that the boy they like won't like them if they don't send the sext, and then if they do send the sext, they get labeled, correct? So
Correct.
What can parents of both girls and boys do to help them navigate this minefield?
I would say there are a couple of things that they could do. I would say the first thing that parents should keep in mind is that most teens, like I said before, are not sexting. So odds are, if you have a teenager, this is not a behavior they're engaging in. The second thing to keep in mind is that really this is pretty developmentally appropriate for teens to be interested in sex, and that the fact that they're sexting is an expression of that.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is a newfound interest for them, this is a really great time for parents to get in there and talk to their kids about values that are important to them, things around issues like consent and about respect for your partners. So absolutely having those conversations with your teens, absolutely. If you have a son, talk to them. If you get a sext from a girl, if you see a male friend distribute one of these to you, say something. Don't just pass it on to your friends and perpetrate this cycle.
And I think it was interesting that, according to your study, a few teens mentioned knowing that their parents might look at their phone as a deterrent. So perhaps checking out your teen's phone every once in a while is not such a bad thing.
But everything in moderation. Some other work that my colleague Scott Campbell, who's also a co-author on this paper, was looking at the role that parental mediation might play. And one of the things that he found was really that when parents were really enforcing really strict guidelines regarding cell phones, that actually didn't really seem to work. It kind of backfired. So it's more about staying connected to your teens and, having an open dialogue with them, but not necessarily laying down the law.
Keeping the conversation open. All right, Julia Lippman, thank you so much for that.